Okay, hi everyone. Come on down. And hi everyone on the stream. I am Cameron Cundiff. I am one of the organizers at the New York City Accessibility Meetup. That's where you are right now. Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to start on a bit of a sober note. I wanted to remember Judy Heumann, who recently passed and is a pioneer of disability rights and advocacy, and she will be missed. On that note, just want to reflect a little bit and think about what's brought us all together today. We're all here for accessibility, and we are excited to be here. My co-hosts, Sean Laureate and Joseph Pesner, are here as well. Thomas Logan and Meryl Evans are joining on the stream, where they are gracefully handling questions and navigating online conversations. Want to thank Jolly McPhee, who's here streaming from the Internet Society of New York Special Interest Group for Accessibility, and to Mirabai Knight, who's captioning today. So thank you to everyone who makes this event possible. I want to also thank our sponsors, Equal Entry, Events, Fable, Google, and Asana, where we are today. The Asana office is, for those who want a visual description, has a pretty stellar view. If I can say so myself, I work at Asana. We are hiring for an accessibility engineer role. If you're interested, come talk to me after and we can have a conversation. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Sandy Lacey. Sandy is the Director of Innovation at the Perkins School for the Blind.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your Tuesday evening to join us. It's Tuesday, right? Yes. To join us here in New York City, stellar view. For those online, thank you for coming here to hear a little bit about the state of disability tech. So as Cameron said, my name is Sandy Lacey. I am a just turned 40-year-old woman. I have brown hair. I'm wearing green glasses, a brown blazer, jeans. And I'm here to talk to you about what we're building at Perkins with regards to creating innovation and coalescing and convening folks around this concept of disability tech. I want to thank my hosts, and I also just want to ask my colleagues who are here in the room if you could just raise your hands. I'm not here alone. I have 4 colleagues here. So afterwards, if you want to talk to someone from Perkins, feel free to go find one of them as well. All right. So before we dive into the Howe Innovation Center, I want to talk really quickly about our namesake, Samuel Gridley Howe. So on the slide is a painting from the 1800s, the first teachers for the school. And as we say in the startup world, he really took the school from 0 to 1. He also was an innovator in both teaching methodologies and in technology. So Howe actually educated a woman named Laura Bridgman, who we believe was the first deaf-blind woman to receive a formal education. And he, in his spare time, developed Boston Line Type, which was a novel tactile language and a precursor to Braille. So we thought it was only fitting that we named our innovation center after Howe. Because it is Women's History Month, I would be remiss if I didn't mention his wife, Julia Ward Howe, as well. She was a force in her own right. She was an abolitionist and ran an anti-slavery newspaper, and she's the author of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. So there you go. Let's advance and talk a little bit about what the Howe Innovation Center is. So really what we want to do at Perkins through this initiative is connect the community of people with disabilities with innovators around the world. And when I say community of people with disabilities, I mean all disabilities, not just visual impairment. 50% of our students at Perkins with a visual impairment have a second disability. And we've been working around the world for 200 years with people with multiple disabilities. And so we really wouldn't be serving our community if we focused solely on visual impairments. So this is really an initiative across all disability communities. And we've started with research. Now I'm gonna put a pin in it because we're gonna talk so much about this, our starting point, and I'm just gonna move on to the other 3 areas of focus at Howe. The first is we really wanna amplify the lived experience. So there are really sticky and persistent problems in daily living, education, and employment that the disability community deeply understands those problem points, but maybe innovators aren't aware of them. And so if we can use Perkins to help amplify and crowdsource those problem statements and make them easily accessible to the innovative community out there, we might be able to channel well-intentioned entrepreneurial activity to the top problem statements that the community wants to see people working on. We really want to help entrepreneurs as well. So common problems that entrepreneurs face: finding capital to get invested into their companies, finding customers for primary market research and user testing, getting your product deployed out into the real world for feedback and how it works when it's out in the wild. These are things that we believe we can build programming around so that we can help entrepreneurs get co-designed products to market. And then finally, we're going to do that by also building a community beyond the community of people with disabilities and entrepreneurs. We want to bring investors, whether it's angel investors, grant writers, VCs. We want to bring them to the table. We want to bring academic institutions to the table. These are students of engineering, design, business, make them aware of what disability technology is and help them get plugged into opportunities. We've also believed that universities have cutting edge technologies that could be applied to accelerate accessibility, and we can help plug them in. I want to give a shout out right now to Olin College of Engineering. We've already entered into a partnership with them. Some of their students are helping us visualize the data from our database so that it will be accessible. So we're already kind of marching down this path. And then finally, big tech companies, large corporates that care about DEIA, that care about accessibility and inclusion, we want to partner with them as well. So now that we've talked about who we're named after and what we're doing, I want to talk about the research that we've developed and where this can possibly take us. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. When I came to Perkins about a year ago, I'm a former analyst, and so I started trying to figure out who's active within the space. And I found really amazing incubator and accelerator programs focused on disability tech globally, like ATS Labs, Remarkable, just to name a few. And I found that the research, though, was really tough for me to get a handle on. There were like market maps and market research for walkers, wheelchairs, canes, and like mobility aids, or digital accessibility and the market there, but I couldn't find any sort of market map around startups that were leveraging cutting edge technologies to make the world accessible. So I thought, let's build it. So I made a really ugly database in Excel, and I'm proud to say that now it has over 750 companies in it. Just to briefly say, the difference between disability tech and assistive technology is that I believe assistive tech is a major component of disability tech, but it's not all of it. So the example I like to give is an inclusive employment startup. is definitely going to increase accessibility for people with disabilities if it is successful, but it's not an assistive technology helping somebody increase their function. So it's actually a broader market. And I want to add that we're really building this in public. So I'm taking that startup concept of build in public, and if you have thoughts and ideas as to the language or the taxonomy that we're using, I want to hear from you and partner with you and build this together. Once we had the 750 companies, I started cataloging them according to the community of people with disabilities the company is trying to serve. So is this building for people with visual impairments, people with mobility disabilities, across 8 different disabilities, and then 18 disability innovation themes. And this is where it starts to get really interesting. So GDI Hub is a phenomenal group in the UK, and they had already developed a taxonomy around how you could innovate in the space of disability. So when something's perfect, adopt it, right? And so they have, self-care, travel, navigation, communication, inclusive employment. These are the types of categories that disability innovation themes would touch. And then in partnership with a wonderful Perkins volunteer, we have a very robust volunteer program and we're always looking for volunteers, I developed a technology taxonomy. And this is where it gets kind of really heady, I would say, but a lot themes, categories, and subcategories. So for the first time, we can actually query this database and say, show me all companies innovating for the visually impaired in the space of navigation using computer vision and haptics. And it will spit out the companies that fit those criteria. We've also started to add the investors, who they are and how much money they've put into the space, the geography, where are the companies located, and the product status. Is this company shipping a product? Is it still in R&D? Did they close? Because some of these companies have already started and folded. And we've been able to see some really cool trends now. I want to shout out to Dylan, who really put the meat on the database. He's in the audience right now, and it's a tough job, but 2 people had to do it, and it was me and him. So this is the first insight into what we're gleaning from the sector. So this is a perceptual market map on the screen. It's a common way that the tech industry looks at activity within a space. And on the slide, there are a bunch of company logos, and they are clustered according to the type of technology that they are. So these companies are all innovating for just the blind and the visually impaired. So this is not all disabilities right here. This is just for visual impairment. And this is only in the space of navigation. There are 106 companies trying to crack the nut right now on navigation for the blind and the visually impaired. And in size order, the largest grouping is wearables. Think of, an Apple Watch, a Fitbit. Those are examples of wearables that the general population uses. In this space, the most common are headsets or glasses. And then following from that, we have other, which would be wrist wearable, a clip, a ring, a harness. The next active section, or with the most activity, is a wayfinding app, so orientation and mobility within a space. And then identification apps. This is really like, tell me what this is that's in front of me. Is this a can of tomato sauce, or is this a can of soup, for example? And then smart canes, so trying to bring the white cane, bring technology to the white cane. The second half of the perceptual market map, because it doesn't fit, is the most active space here are tactile displays and inclusive employment. We also have education, travel, mobile phones, keyboards, and digital therapy. And if you like this, I want everybody to know that at the end of my presentation, there's a QR code where you can scan and you can join our community, and this will be downloaded in an accessible version onto your laptop. So and this is just the beginning. So this is a perceptual market map. We can also start seeing some trends in geography. So at least 140 companies are based in the US. That's around 40% of the global market is based in the US, innovating for the visually impaired. The top 5 countries are the US with 141, the United Kingdom with 26, Israel with 18, India with 17, and Australia with 16. Now keep in mind, these are, again, just companies innovating for the blind and the visually impaired, so not all disabilities. And 48 countries are home to at least one startup in the space. From here, the next slide, we have a vertical bar graph, and this is the top 10 companies that have raised over $350 million in the space of visual impairment, with Orcam, which is an Israel-based wearable that attaches to a pair of glasses. They've raised the most with $86.4 million. And then I want to spend a chunk of time on this slide and the following. So we see most of the activity is in the space of navigation, and that's important. Now, some might think that navigation is only getting from point A to point B. But if you can really get navigation right, you'll start influencing some very thorny problems that persist within the visually impaired community. Our employment rate is 40%, which means 60% of people in the US who are blind or visually impaired are not employed. Our college completion rate, 6 out of 10 students with visual impairments who start college do not get a degree. So if you don't feel safe, confident, or comfortable getting from one place to another, it hinders your ability to participate in education and employment. So I'm really happy to see a lot of activity within this space because it has ripple effects in some of the key problem areas that our community faces. Following navigation, we see a lot of activity in like custom tablets and mobile devices, as well as tactile design, and also education and inclusive employment. We can break it down even further now, and this is why I'm kind of obsessed with this database. So the navigation, we can see how companies are trying to tackle the problem of navigation. Wearables are the most common method. There are over 35 companies actively trying to develop a wearable device to enable navigation. And glasses are the most common category, with at least 23 startups globally operating within this space. Collectively, these companies have raised $135 million, and 13 of them are shipping a product, which to me was very interesting because this is a hardware investment. A hardware company is hard to stand up. So the fact that 13 of the glasses companies have a product that they're currently selling in the market is a pretty high rate of getting something out the door. But glasses aren't the only type of wearable. As we mentioned before, harnesses, rings, wrist wearables. They've raised a total of around $14.3 million in financing. And there are at least 15 companies taking this approach, with wrist wearable being the most common, but we found 2 harnesses, a clip, and a ring also. And wayfinding apps. We have at least 33 startups that have an app in the wayfinding space, and they're all taking a variety of different approaches. Good Maps, which spun out of the American Printing House for the Blind, they closed a $3.5 million seed round last year from a Kentucky-based venture fund. Right here is an Israeli-based startup that is using partnerships and sensor technology to increase accessibility in indoor navigation, and they're being deployed in every McDonald's in Israel right now, and they just opened up a US office. So there's a lot of activity here, and I could go on and on, but for the sake of time, I'm gonna move us along. And here's where the technology taxonomy comes in. So now we can also see that navigation companies are using a wide variety of technologies, with geofencing and image recognition being the most popular technologies implemented. Some of the companies are using a combination of 3 or 4 technologies, so it's not one for each company, but it's very interesting to see how a lot of these companies are harnessing, attaching onto one technology and really trying to leverage it in the navigation space. So I know that was a lot, but it's just the beginning. And this is just the first research insight that we've shared. In fact, this is the first public event for the Howe Innovation Center. So I'm really excited about it. Thank you. And I really just want to say that, all ships rise with the tide. A lot of folks have been active within the disability tech ecosystem for a while. And I think that entrepreneurs, accessibility professionals, people with the lived experience of having a disability, any combination thereof, we want to hear from you. There are so many ways we can work together here. This QR code will take you to a sign-up page where you will get our research for free. And you'll hear about programming that we roll out, future speaking engagements that we have, and it will also be a great way to connect with us and help inform us in the direction that things that you'd like to see be created for the community. If this doesn't work for you, also innovation@perkins.org is a great way to reach me directly. So I just wanted to thank everyone so much for participating in this tonight. And we've had data, right? Like I've given you this high level overview of data, but now you get to hear the fun stories behind the data. So I've actually invited 2 folks who have been really helpful to me so far this year as I've been standing up this initiative. We have Keith Kirkland, who's the Chief Haptics Officer of Wear.Works. He's going to talk about true tales as a disability tech entrepreneur. And we have Ron Russo from 5 Line Ventures. He's invested in the space, and he's going to tell us what it's been like as an investor within the space. So I'm going to cede the microphone to Keith, and he's going to come on up and share the Wear.Works story. Thank you all so much.
Hello, everyone. You're welcome. That was amazing. So much data. I'm like, wow. I wish this data was available when we started the company. We could have made so many different choices. So I appreciate that and all of the hard work that I'm sure went into scouring the earth to find all of us technology companies that are focused on trying to make an impact in the disability space. So my name is Keith Kirkland. I am the co-founder and chief haptic officer of Wear.Works. Haptic means touch, in case you don't know, nothing personal. And what we do is we build products and experiences that use the skin as a communications channel to deliver information in a more intuitive and less obtrusive way. Now, we started with the idea of navigation. I started with this idea of trying to build a suit that would allow a person to download Kung Fu, and the suit would teach you vibrations. But we had a sense that navigation had a bigger market. And as we dug into the space, really what we were finding was, a lot of people ask me, it's like, oh my God, what made you want to work with people who are blind? Like, do you have a blind family member? I'm like, no, I never met a person who was blind until I started a company to help people who were blind, right? And you go, well, how did you do that? And why did you do that, right? And our story is very different, is we were selling a vision of navigation, and we felt like this was the opening opportunity. But more, we saw navigation as the pinnacle, because somehow someone deemed vision as the most important sense, and then everything else was like less than that. And so when you look at the research dollars spent over the last 100 years on the 5 senses, you'll see dramatically that most of it is in vision. That's why my Oculus Quest costs $249, but a Braille keyboard costs, correct me if I'm wrong, $2,500? Oh, yeah. Why? Because we cared more to make VR headsets cheaper, and we put the research dollars behind it. And that's what I mean by care, right? Is we put research dollars behind it. Bose spent $50 million developing noise canceling in 15 years. His CEO came to him and said, hey, Bose, Dr. Bose, sorry. Rest in peace, Dr. Bose. Dr. Bose, we spent $50 million in 15 years developing noise canceling. He was like, wow, $50 million. He's like, if I was the CEO of a publicly traded company, I would have been fired years ago. Right, and the thing is that like right now we are in a space where we're looking at how do we take longer term visions around what it means to build products and to build ecosystems around them. So now vision is the king. We're gonna walk in and usurp the king by showing that you can do navigation with only touch. And that was our original mission, was how do we get people out of their phones and back into the real world? And we started by going to who? Obviously, travelers. Right? Who needs to get out of their phone more than people who are traveling, right? I lived in Japan for 6 months. Addresses don't make sense, right? You know, like the cops couldn't help me figure out where I was at. They pulled out a book and everything, right? But if I could just vibrate around and didn't have to trust in that piece of it, then I could use my vision and my hearing to pay attention to what's going on around me. And of course, if your vision or hearing isn't accessible to you, well, then that's a pretty big challenge. So we took on this big opportunity, navigation. 1 billion people use Google Maps every single month. And as we grew in, we really looked at it and we saw the opportunity was really, how do we take this information and communicate it through touch? And this is where my previous history of working with a Kung Fu suit. Essentially, I was trying to find a way to leverage communicating information directly through the skin without needing someone physically there to tell you or to verbally tell you. And so I remembered my Kung Fu practice, and I remembered that, you know, my teacher would move my joints into position with touch, not say a single word. So it's like, how do we leverage that technology and navigation? And ultimately what we did is we built what we call the haptic corridor. The haptic corridor is a 360-degree touch-based experience that when you're going in the right direction, you feel absolutely nothing. You spin slightly to the left, about 20 degrees, left of center or right of center, you get a tiny vibration. And the vibration scales the wronger you are. Until you're 180 degrees the wrong way, we give you the loudest vibration we can. What this does is it plays a simple game of hot and cold through touch that allows you to know exactly which way is the right way to go and tells you with volume how wrong you are. And we found that like people who are blind and visually impaired really gravitated toward the technology. Now I talked about the idea of starting with travelers. There was one problem. I used to spend 30 minutes telling a sighted person why a visual map is a problem. 30 minutes. I'd have 2 minutes left to talk about how haptics is going to change the world. Wasn't a lot of time and wasn't a great pitch, right? And then ultimately at the end, we knew this was great for the blind community, but we knew that we felt like this will get there at the end after we make sure it works for everyone else first, because we had no idea we could even navigate people using haptics. So like, let's start there, right? And at the end of the day, what happened is that we realized, and this was, you know, South by Southwest is coming up. I'm heading there on Friday. You know, they become investors of ours. I'm actually going to do a performance. I'm doing a haptic rap to educate people about touch. Maybe I'll let you hear a verse of it. But, you know, when our first trip to South by Southwest, my team went down there and we met someone. We just pulled random people out of the crowd and get them to try our band on. And, you know, like they would spin around and then we would get a lot of people to stop in the right direction. We were just using this to get data because, you know, this is how you got data when you don't have any money. And it was great. It was great. And one of the people that we pulled into the audience happens to be, he was like, wow, this is amazing. I work for the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. You should take to the blind school right now. And we're like, right now? And so we like, okay, we're about to leave tomorrow. So me and my co-founder, we literally pack up at that moment, jump in a taxi and go to like the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Long story short, no one was expecting us. We saw some people in the parking lot. It's like, hey, let's ask them, you know, and someone's like, hey, we have some technology that we think will help people who are blind. We're not sure. They was like, well, what is it? Someone was like, well, go here and do this. And someone was like, well, how does it work? And then when he tried it on, and now I have this joke that says, when we make people spin around, they become our friends. Because like, put the band on him, he spun around, and by the end, he was like, you need to speak to Scott Bowman. He's the assistant commissioner. His office is on the second floor. We walked into Scott Bowman's office very unannounced with a crew of about 4 employees guiding us, plus with a crew of our own 3. It was kind of like, I imagine like it looked like the mafia was showing up for you or a hitman. anyways, I was like diffused, like, hey, Scott, we're friendly. And we have the technology. We'd love to spend some time with you. And, like, truth be told, like, he gave us like 4 hours of his day, let us use his office. We borrowed some of his employees who were blind off of their work schedules so they can talk to us and try their device out. And by the end of that conversation, all three of my co-founders, and we never agree, but all three of my co-founders, we walked out unanimous for independent reasons that, like, the only way to do what we were doing is to start with the blind and visually impaired market first. And that transformed our entire company. This was 2016. The minute that happens, we start going in, investors start understanding what it is that we're doing now. And more importantly, sighted people started to see the opportunity for themselves. So now I give a presentation, and always someone sighted comes over to me and says, hi, I'm not blind, but I have a hard time figuring out which way I'm facing when I get out the train. Can I use your technology? And we're like, yes. And that was the point. Like, when we initially started, we went to the National Federation of the Blind, and they told us, don't build a blind device. Build a device that everybody can use that's optimized for the blind experience. It's like, if you build it only for us, we won't want it. But if you build it and it works great for us and for everyone else, like, we'll find you, don't worry. And that was the message that we took from the whole experience. And so now, where are we? The Wayband app is available in the App Store. We have a navigation app. So we kind of fall into two bubbles. We have the wearable and the navigation app. So our navigation app is available. And initially, we started with this idea of only using it for the Wayband. Ultimately, what we realized was that with the economic disparities, unemployment statistics that we just heard about, that was a big challenge to make people buy another device. So first thing we did was like, hey, can we make the phone vibrate so that they don't need to buy anything additional, right? And then we added, of course, the Apple Watch integration into other smart devices. Like, can we tag into what it is that you're already wearing? Now, our patents cover a haptic corridor. It doesn't cover just the Wayband. We can put the haptic corridor on your phone and your Apple Watch. We can put it in the seat of your car. We're still covered, right? And so this opened up a whole opportunity for us. But more importantly, it opened up a different business model. So after we delivered the hardware products to market, we realized that we had an even bigger opportunity. Companies like Uber and like Disney and like, Waymo and, mapping companies were like, hey, I don't really want to use your app or your band, but if I could take your haptic corridor and put it in my thing, well, that would be amazing, because then I would have accessible navigation very easily. And then we started to look like, wow, well, if we could just integrate our haptic corridor into a Google Maps, 1 billion people have accessible navigation instantly. Changes the entire dynamics of what we can do versus the Wayband. Now, we still make the Wayband. You can still go to Amazon and buy it right now. It's available, right? But one of the things that we also did is that because of this new business model, right, I listen to audiobooks exclusively, right? How much of that money goes back to the blind community, because that's who created it, right? That's what it's created for, right? Siri, exclusively I use Siri. I use voice assistants for everything. I don't touch my phone unless I have to. Right? Again, how much of that money, now the technology being available is great, right? More audiobooks means more people have accessibility, but from an equity point of view, could we do something a little bit different? And this is where we were like, well, what if we got enterprise customers to make the app available for free? So the Wayband app was $99. The Wayband cost $249. As of last month, the Wayband app is now available for free with an optional 99 cents a year just to support the development. And now every person who's blind, open all around the world, can download Wayband for free. And we were able to do this because, again, we were thinking about business models that leverage technology that was built for the blind community into a software enterprise solutions, and having that pay for the technology so the community can have access to it. And we see this as like not only just a great opportunity for us, but like a new way of doing things, right? Because at that point, like, we talk about this idea of feedback and like being important. I'm not blind, right? We built a company for people who are blind and visually impaired. How do we do it? Because we listen. We put out crap, they told us it was crap, and we fixed it. That's it. It's a very simple process. Just listen, right? And because we listen, we got access to so many people who were just really willing to. Like, we have people like testing in Alaska. Like, there are Waybands in Saudi Arabia right now. It's crazy. It blows my mind. But we've been on this journey for 7 long years, right? And it took a long time for people to get to a point where we are now, where like, obviously we need technology that is accessible, right? You know, like this was a niche market when I was talking to investors like 6 years ago, right? And so I just want to say that all in all, our journey has been pretty amazing. Really want to thank, you know, like a lot of our supporters. Sandy, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here. And as a side note, as my ending, I'm gonna share the first verse of my haptic rap with you, right? So, thank you. Side story, I've been rapping kind of since I was 16 years old. Not really. I wanted to be a rapper, realized I wouldn't be any good because Jay-Z was too great. And so I decided to do something else with my life. Blind people run marathons now, yay. Oh, we did that, I forgot to say that. We helped the first person who was blind run the New York City Marathon without sighted assistance. And so, you know, like, oh, thank you. And so, you know, like, I made a good choice, right? But now I've been like, how do I jump back into my personal expression? And ultimately, I realized that we have a marketing problem with haptics because no one knows what the word means. So I made a rap to tell you. Right, now, let's see how this goes. All right. We have a vision. We have a vision. We have a vision. We have a vision. We have a vision of a world that doesn't need vision. We have a vision of a world that doesn't need vision. Okay, wait, sorry, I messed that up. I'm gonna start that again. This is good practice for me. I'm like, I have to get on stage. So this is like, in my car, it sounds totally different when I do it. I'm way better. All right, okay. We have a vision of a world that doesn't need vision, elevate and touch to the level of sight and sound, and that's our mission. Research spending. Today is access tomorrow for all of our children. Look at the spending. Over the last 100 years, spread over each of the 5 of our senses. Seeing is believing. Most went to vision, second went to sound, which is pretty far distant. For 100 years, money only spent on 2 senses. Isn't that senseless? That shit is senseless. Here's my 2 cents, and vision is king and touch is in prison. Patriarch of all the senses is sight. Who really made that decision? Who the F made that decision? No one with limited vision, none of the 285 million, and wasn't listening to the 460 million folks with limited hearing. Digital, so sight and sound driven that it left like a billion on the wrong side of a digital divide with virtually no pot to piss in. The future is touch, that's our mission. Wear.Works is haptics, touch with the weight and intention of dramatically making a difference. You need to listen. Thank you. And now I am going to introduce Mr. Ron Russo.
Thank you. Nice work. Well, that is going to be difficult to follow. I will not be ending with a rap of any sort. First, I'd like to thank the sponsors, Sandy, Perkins, for having me as well tonight to tell you a little bit about the story of ARX and the formation of the company and how we got involved in it, and maybe a little bit about how we see the opportunity to address problems that have existed, forever for folks with visual impairments or blindness. So we're investors, Five Line Ventures, early stage investor. We invested in a company that was founded by 2 Italian entrepreneurs, technologists in their own right. And when we met them, they were working out of a small studio in Chiasso, Switzerland. And they very intentionally built their workforce to include 2 employees with visual impairment. And I think their vision for what Horus, which is the original company, was to have real dialogue in a community and understand what the true needs of that community were, as opposed to what we've seen, I think, for decades from technology solutions, which are developed by technologists who really don't have a good understanding of what the true needs are. And I think that there's a couple layers to that. I think that for me, there's the foundational needs of assistive technology, using that term broadly. And I think that there are the blocking and tackling needs of form and function, the technology that addresses specific elements of that need, which Sandy laid out. Some of them are navigation, object detection, text reading, facial recognition, and so on. But even today, in 2023, much of the technology that exists still feels very clinical. It feels very sterile. It feels antiseptic, and it's not been built as consumer products are built. It hasn't been built with magnetism or sexiness or fun. And, the iterations that ARX has gone through, the first investment in ARX was made in 2016. So we're working on a similar timeline to Keith, and we've iterated quite a bit over those 7 years. And I think there's been some great victories and some terrible defeats. But I think the best part for us has been the learnings that we've gathered from the dialogue, true dialogue, and by listening first. I think one of the most frustrating elements for me of understanding what exists currently, and even the strategic vision of some of the largest incumbent technology companies, is that they still to this day don't engage with a community. They don't listen to the true needs of a community. And as a result, some of the companies, without getting into them specifically, which have raised the most capital on those slides, have virtually no product market fit with the community that they originally intended to provide product to. And to me, that's in certain ways an indictment of philosophy. It is an indictment of vision of founders. And I think we and the founders of Horace, and then Charles Leclerc, who's the current CEO of ARX, have come at it quite differently. We met Charles actually through one of our colleagues who showed up here unannounced, who's the CEO and founder of one of our other portfolio companies. So it was a nice surprise for me. But Jan helped us find Charles, and Charles didn't have experience in assistive technology. He worked in gaming and in computer vision and in augmented audio, augmented AR, audio AR rather. And as a result, his views on what ARX should be, I think, dovetailed nicely with our views that the foundational needs are still the same, and you must have text reading or object recognition or navigation. Whatever you purport to make available to this community must be there, and it must work flawlessly. That is difficult. But beyond that, these offerings should be fun. They should be exciting. And he's integrated, I think, some of those elements into what ARX is. And he has some scene recognition, which is beautiful. Is it foundationally necessary for object recognition or facial recognition or text? No. But it can give you the audio experience of looking at a sunrise or of a rainstorm or of a cityscape with buildings. And I credit Charles with understanding, some of the other elements of what we believed ARX would be. When I think about the opportunity to affect change amongst, hundreds of millions of people with visual impairment, I'm as excited as I've ever been about ARX. And I think the opportunity in certain ways is more urgent, and technology continues to evolve in a positive way. And there are other wearables and pieces of hardware and software and AI and machine learning, computer vision and cameras, et cetera, continue to evolve and I think progress beautifully. And there's no reason to recreate the wheel. Sandy and Keith both said it. Things that work, we should adopt. We're never going to be able to compete with Google or Microsoft or incumbent technology companies that are building some of the underlying technology that we may leverage. But the reality is that without the effort and without the dialogue, it will be very difficult to make products that truly can change the lives of people who use that product. So just getting back to the origin story a little bit, when we first got attached to ARX, which was Horace at the time, We really believed in the founders. We believed in their mission and in their vision and in the development. And, it's been an interesting ride. I think, like Keith, we had some thoughts about scaling, and, it's a hardware device at the end of the day, although there's elements of software that we use, which we believe could provide a platform experience to larger entities that might want to integrate it. But ultimately, we fall back on the user experience. And the user experience for ARX is something that is pretty amazing. And I feel, some pride, not in the authorship, but the pride and the effort that's been expended, over the course of 6 years to push through and to try to understand those needs. It's one of our investors in another business gave me an analog, which I love, which is, I think, very relevant to this. It was really relating to healthcare more specifically, but the concept that he introduced was that healthcare organizations today create a menu. They deliver a menu to a patient and say, here, John Smith, take a look at this menu and you pick one of the 10 things that are on that menu. The reality is that those 10 choices may not be at all relevant to John Smith because they don't have a dialogue. There is no iterative nature of that relationship. There is no listening that happens. And for us, the same holds true. I think we are better for the failures that we've had. We are better for the understandings that we've gained over the last 6+ years and the iterations that have been a product of failure. And there's been tons of them, over that time. It's been really, really interesting for me. And Sandy, I give you and Perkins, tremendous amount of credit. It's pretty incredible what exists, over the last 200 years, and looking forward, I think the future is quite bright. And one of the terms, which, these are Sandy's words, not mine, but progress over perfection is everything. And I think we've tried to live those words at ARX. We know that ARX is not perfect. There are certainly problems with it. And, it is a wearable device that sits on the side of your head. It's a stereoscopic camera with bone conducting audio. And that was intentionally created by the founders because if you have a visual impairment, the last thing in the world you want to do is lose one of your other senses. So bone conducting audio gives you the sound that you need without broadcasting it to the rest of the world around you. And that in certain ways is very keep it simple, stupid, and very obvious. But in other ways, I think it reflects the mechanisms that we've tried to employ and to understand and to listen, truly listen. But I think, as I look at some of those charts, it's incredible. It really is incredible. And a lot of that progress has happened over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. And that's the good news. The good news is that there's never been more focus on trying to truly address the needs of folks with visual impairment. And I think the good news is that there's never been more will amongst the leaders, the incumbent technology companies, to try to help support that. So we have worked quite closely with a number of those companies in understanding what technology they have, which maybe we could layer in, maybe we can add, we can partner. And even some of the earlier stage companies, I would consider us earlier stage as well. But even the earlier stage companies, I think, have a much more open mind about collaboration and, co-support or co-development of product. And I guess for me, it comes back to that. You have to have that commitment, and you have to believe, and you have to be able to forge forward. And I think I've seen what ARX can provide. I've seen the feedback from users, and the feedback has been really, truly excellent. And I give Charles the credit for that. But it's really, really fun to see someone who uses ARX for the first time and has a great experience. And you understand that if there's 300, 400, 500 million people in the world whose lives you could affect, either through independence or autonomy or excitement or magnetism or fun, there's no reason why that shouldn't happen. And I'm incredibly excited about what the future looks like for us, for some of the other companies that we're fast following or collaborating with. And so I would extend the same offer that I think that Sandy extended. I would love to hear from all of you. We do try to reach out to our community, and we do want to understand what things you may want or need. I think we also try to create, a bona fide feedback loop. And one of the examples I gave was, we've been working on a way to, in effect, create a blockchain, not a blockchain in the sense of currency, but create a transparent feedback loop for our community. So that transparent feedback loop would enable me as a user to say, on March 7th at 8:30, text reading didn't work well. I was trying to read a menu or a book or a letter. That feedback then lives in the public domain. And we then, as an organization, must respond to that query. And maybe we respond to it tonight, maybe we respond to it tomorrow. Maybe we understand that there's an issue. We may not be able to solve that issue immediately, but being responsive is a start. Some of these technologies that exist currently, and again, I'll go back to the largest technology companies that exist, don't have a feedback loop. And they're not held accountable for the shortcomings or the gaps that exist in the products that they brought to market. And there's no way for a user to understand whether or not those companies know there was a problem, are working on a solution, or even care to do either of those two things. So I think for us, we're trying to establish that dialogue transparently and openly and presently, and in a way that I think builds a rapport and builds a bona fide level of trust in the community that we're out here trying to solve some real problems and also trying to have some fun along the way. So I don't know how we are on time. I didn't put up a timer on this, but I thank all of you for being here today. And I thank you, Sandy, for the introduction and for the opportunity to speak. I look forward to speaking with some of you afterwards or in the future, but thanks again. And that's all I have.
Yeah, great job. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. That concludes the speaking part of our program, does it? Or no, we have. Yes. Okay, great. We're going to get a closeout here. Here we go.
Well, if we have time, do we have time for Q&A, Karen?
Yeah. Oh, great.
And we have a mic here for Q&A as well.
Okay.
All right. Before I give it to audience and webcast questions, does anyone in the audience here have a question they'd like to ask? All right.
Hi. I just have a question regarding the mapping. Do you think you'll add potential investors to a potential map so people can quickly access accelerators and investors that may be more amenable to a longer time frame that takes the disability tech product out into the world?
Yes, great question. So it's on our near-term roadmap to create an open sourced Airtable basically of angel investors interested in disability tech or assistive technology and venture funds as well. So this is also a call. Feel free to send them our way if you know them. We have a bunch, but if you're one who's listening to, please do reach out. We want to make that list available. We'll also probably put together a map of all the incubators and accelerators that focus on disability technology. So there's a variety of things that we can do there.
I'm curious about the active development of your database that you're working on and how you're going about maintaining the accuracy of it currently and discovering new players in the market as the industry evolves.
Yeah, great question. So we've got a lot of alerts set. So every day we have inbound. The more people we tell what we're doing, the more companies people send us, right? We also have an advisory group. Keith is one of our advisory group members, and Charles from ARX is one of our advisory group members as well. They're consistently scouring to see kind of what's going on out there. But really the answer is I looked at all the disability tech accelerators and incubator programs. I read every market research report I could. I scoured CB Insights, Crunchbase, Dealbook, to call the core companies, and then we just add as we go. But Dylan is our full-time data analyst co-op, so we actually have a full-time resource dedicated to the research side of things. Yeah.
Okay, a question from the webcast. What do the speakers think about the sonification of charts? How useful it could be for the visually impaired comparing with the conventional text alternatives?
So it's a great question. Actually, within our partnership with Olin College of Engineering, we've been working with Perkins Access, which is our digital accessibility consulting group as well, to test the sonification of charts and data. So we did a variety of user testing sessions with folks with different visual impairments, so low vision, blind later in life, so a variety of different tests to see how folks with visual impairments liked to absorb charts and graphs. And we did some sonification testing in there as well. Over the next month or two, we're going to be putting those computer visualizations with some sonification up on our site. So they're not ready yet, but soon-ish they'll be up there.
How do you consider companies that do not focus on disability tech but may have a department that focuses on disability tech? Were there any edge cases that you had to have a debate about whether to include or not include?
Yes. So actually, there's like a variety of companies that are not in our database that are actually doing a lot with regards to disability tech, meaning like Microsoft. Like I didn't put a big company in here. I really tried to do like a startup market analysis. So there are that's a whole other research realm, right? Like what are big tech companies doing with regards to disability and accessibility, which is on our research roadmap. There were some companies where I would find something and it actually was just like a research project at a university that stopped. And so I had to make the decision, like, do I put that in? Did these students actually try to form a company and get something going? And there were probably around 30 to 50 of those where I found like newspaper articles on them, but I chose not to include those projects because they didn't actually advance to the stage of people pursuing them as a company.
Thank you very much. Another one from the webcast. We've got Sandy. What is the Howe Center's business model? Is it a combination of VC and private equity, public funding, or grants?
Yeah. So great question. We are putting together our business model right now. And if you would like to invest in the Howe Innovation Center, please find me or Natalie or Allie afterwards.
Awesome. Another one from the webcast, and please raise your hand in the audience if you have questions. For Keith, are there any haptic standards? For example, 2 buzzes for turn left.
So from a point of view of haptic standards for the world, not really, right? And the haptics industry is kind of coming together to work these things out. And that's a big part of what we see. Like I've been talking to a lot of CEOs of other haptics companies. I can say that there are other CEOs of other haptics companies now, which is amazing. But like a lot of what's going on is like, how do we make sure that we get device interoperability for haptics and feeling from one device to another? But for our device, if we're talking about standards for like navigating, we've built in like a system of buzzes that allow you, so we don't do the buzz thing because remembering too many signals becomes a challenge. And I think the limit is about 5 to 8 signals that you can remember before you actually have to start studying. And we don't want to make language acquisition is really hard. We don't want to go that product route, right? So what we've done is we've made the haptic corridor so intuitive that everyone can figure out the right way to go. And then what we've done is through the user piece, we realized that people would get to the corner and they would stop and be like, okay, now where do I go next? So we started giving like preemptive left and right haptic signals on the way there. So that like left's coming up, you can kind of keep it moving. And in those, we've standardized what left haptics are and what right haptics are. But our real goal is that who made us the haptic gods to determine what left and right haptic should be, right? Like our real goal is like, how do we build tools to allow you to like build your own version of whatever the standards are, and then do machine learning at scale to see what left should be based off of community input as opposed to kind of like top-down dictatorship.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Jan, founder of an augmented reality company called Beam, good friend of Ron's as well. This is less of a question, more of a statement. The ability for everyone to come together and create an ecosystem like this, I think has a huge impact on the commercialization of the tech. We work with a lot of the largest tech companies in the US, and they often say accessibility technology in its commercialization phase is a hit and miss for them to focus on. And they'd rather focus on it as a project to assist their PR or to be able to talk about at their AGMs. And for everyone to be able to come together here and create all this data, I think is going to have a profound impact on the seriousness that these big tech companies will take on the industry. So really well done for that.
Awesome, thank you. That's part of the goal. Great.
Hi, I'm, pardon my throat. I'm Kevin Blemmel. I work for 2U and edX, and I'm a senior director of product accessibility there. And I'm familiar with Teach Access as an organization that wants to bring into tech education standards and understanding into the curriculum so that people who start building products are aware at the outset of their careers how to approach it without having to come and kind of learn that on the job at some place that happens to care about it. I'm wondering if you're familiar with any organizations or entities that are trying to push that same kind of education early into the system around the design UX field or into business or product strategy or thinking?
It's a great question. I actually am not. I can say, though, that every week at Perkins, I get 4 to 5 emails from student groups who are working on a product in the assistive tech space, and they're looking for access to people to either talk about for primary market research or for user testing. And so that leads me to make an assumption that universities are embedding this type of user research and testing into their entrepreneurship programs or their industrial design programs. Right now, we sometimes have the capability to meet those needs, but that's something that we want to stand up over the coming year or two. But I don't know of any. Jennifer, do you in the back? No? Okay. But we can also do some research and get back to you. I'm good at research, apparently, so.
Hey, Sandy.
Yeah.
So looking at those charts, when you see all of those companies distributed, where are you like, oh my gosh, how is there not a company for X? Like, where are the big gaps and opportunities in your mind?
Yeah. It's a very, very good question. And I'm not sure I can do it justice with an answer right now. I would say that I looked at it like a month ago and I said, inclusive employment, 4 companies, that can't be right. And I went back in and actually realized that my data entry needed to be like more robust there. And all of a sudden I found 21 companies or something within the space. And that's because in my research, it was really interesting. In the coding for the language for those companies, disability didn't necessarily pop up in inclusive employment. So bias, women engineering, race, that would be like in the language describing the company, but not necessarily disability. And that's how I would miss it from the data pull. So, a lot of this is still a work in progress. I would say that was one that I noticed. Yeah. Also, education and completing college, there's a lot of information access technologies. I was introduced to a company recently that's trying to improve how Braille is printed. So this is just a statistic that kind of floors me. If you need like an advanced calculus Braille textbook, it can take 1.5 years to print and cost $35,000. So like huge problem in that space, right? And so I think that that's one. Braille literacy rates globally are quite low. They're around 10%. So that's 9 out of every 10 people who are blind or visually impaired actually don't read Braille. And part of that has to do with Braille education and how tough it is. And so there are some really interesting startups within that space. There's a company called Tinkerbell Labs, which is trying to gamify teaching Braille with a device that they're selling through APH called Poly. And there's a startup coming out of Cornell that's like a glove that uses an AI algorithm to read the Braille cell so that you get the feedback in real time as to what you're feeling with your finger. But these are just some spaces where I haven't seen as much attention, like Braille literacy, and it's a big problem that could be tackled because it's the only way that people who are visually impaired can write. It's the path to literacy. Yeah. Sure.
Hold on, could you take the mic?
I'm sorry. Forgive me if this is an oversimple question, but with at minimum hundreds of visually impaired people living in our community, where do they go to find all of these products?
It's a very good question. So in the education system, a lot of them come from an organization called American Printing House for the Blind. They provide a lot of the education assistive technology in the United States. There are also a lot of regional distributors of assistive technology. So you go to like your local low vision and blindness distributor, and what they have in stock is what you're exposed to. And so and I actually did show the market map to a regional distributor, and he recognized 5% of the companies on the market map, which shows that 95% of the technologies that are out there aren't necessarily on his radar, or they don't make sense for them to carry in their store because of they're an app, or the markups don't make sense. So I just thought that was really interesting because it means that if let's say you have cardiac event and you lose part of your vision and you go to your local regional distributor to find out what assistive technology you can access, what they have is what you're exposed to. And so we're hoping that our market map and the research insights that we can put out through the Howe Innovation Center will evolve into a place where people can find a variety of technologies and services that might meet their needs or their loved one needs or their child's needs by searching through what you're actually looking for.
Thank you.
Yep.
We're going to do one last question. Do we have anyone here in the audience who would like to ask a last question, or do we have anything on the
All right. Now I get to choose the last question.
Oh, fun.
Okay, this is a good one. And it goes, if anyone was at our last meetup, what do you all think is the best use of artificial intelligence or AI for accessibility?
It's a very specific one. I'm going to pass it to Keith first, and I'm going to buy myself time to think.
Artificial intelligence for accessibility. There's so many ways you can go. I think that from speaking specifically from haptics, I spent 2 years studying color theory as a designer. I know how the brain processes color information, how eyes process color information, challenges of eyes processing color information, how to get around that. Also, I can do what? Get you to look at where I want you to look. Right? But we don't have that kind of research with touch. We don't have this scale. And why? Well, because, touch was related to sex for most of human history, and we were don't do that. So guess what? Just if you said, do something wearable technology, the first thing you do is put lights in your hoodie. If you pay research touch, the first thing you're gonna do is research sex, right? And that was not allowed to happen. So what we ended up with is a deficiency of research and understanding how the brain processes touch information. And more importantly, in our case, the average haptician, because you can't get a haptics degree at undergraduate or the master's level, the only thing that you can get close to a haptics degree is human-computer interface, and that's at the PhD level. And so, I may be wrong, so please correct me, community, if I'm off target. But at the PhD level, essentially, is the only time where you get hapticians. So your average haptician has the same amount of like knowledge base as like a general practitioner. Guess what that makes? That makes haptics really expensive to make. You know what? I need an undergraduate haptic course. I need like a general assembly of haptics where I can put someone in, and in 9 to 12 months, they understand the fundamentals and can start working, right? And so I think that like where AI really supports the haptic space is like how do we do all this research at scale? Because I don't know if the things that vibrate and I like, or the things that touch tactilely I like, you like, right? And this is going to be as personal as we get. And this world is like, this is the only time, haptics are the only way a digital product can touch you. And that's why it's so tightly controlled. Apple did a really great job putting controls on it, so apps aren't just buzz, look at me, right? But now, what we really need to do is we really need to open up these channels so that we can get more research in. And I think that like AI and machine learning on that research is gonna like quantum leap our ability to kind of process all the information we're going to get at scale to do like actionable insights.
I thought of an answer while listening at the same time. So I actually thought of two. One is taking computer vision technologies and actually moving from interpreting what is there through like an optical character recognition to actually like a scene reader. So you're walking down the street and it's telling you like there's a blue house on your left and there's a car in the driveway, rather than it just saying like 51 Maple Street. Like actually kind of taking it to the next level of what you're absorbing and where you are. I think that would be really impactful. Another is around augmentative and alternative communication tools. So everybody's afraid of ChatGPT and these large language processing, but they actually have a big implication for the AAC systems. And I'm not quite sure how it would work, but I can just really see these large language models taking AAC communication to a new level. So those are my two answers. Ron, do you have one?
I think that there's
And you can close us out.
I think relating to ARC specifically, I think it, for me, it probably is related to computer vision and closing the gaps in what is seen reactively. And then, over time with that information, the data, AI will enable you to know, for example, if you're walking down VC Street or Day Street, that there is something on the left down, it will close the gaps in reactivity as opposed to being a consumer of data that you see. There will be a baseline of information that is consumed, and there will be gaps that get closed. And so that's not just speed, but it's accuracy. And I think there's also, scarily intuition that goes along with that, understanding, we already have some of this already exists through Google, right? It knows that you go to Starbucks at a particular time of day and it gives you directions there. So I think closing the gaps in reactivity to me would be valuable. But again, I think some of the applications for AI will be specific to that use case. For me, I go immediately to computer vision, some of the stuff that maybe you talked about as well. Sandy, I'll let you close us out.
All right. Cool. Okay, well, is that it? We're gonna, okay. All right, come on up here. Let's give the thank yous. And thank you everyone so much for having us.
All right, everybody, let's give Sandy, Keith, and Ron another round of applause for fantastic presentation. Once again, on behalf of Accessibility New York City, I'd like to thank Jolie McPhee from the Accessibility Special Interest Group of the Internet Society of New York, who provides our live stream to YouTube. All of our talks are streamed and kept online on YouTube. We'd also like to thank Mirabai Knight, our fantastic captioner, who provided captions for today's meetup. We always have human captioning at our events. I'd like to thank our 2 sign language interpreters today, and then thank you to Thomas Logan and Merrill Evans for helping organize these events. Feel free to converse. We have the space for a little bit more. And thank you again for everyone for coming.